Okay, we're going to do today the Testament base. We're holding the test on base. We finished off yesterday the story in the Mikdash. They had a needle that was inside. It's a Mishnah Nadius. It says they had a needle. Sorry. It said that there was a carbon that they shachted, and inside the carbon they found the needle that was tamei, and the problem was they didn't know what's the din. The needle was tamei. We're going to see in a second what that meant, but there's a suffix if the knife touched. We don't know if the knife touched the needle, or if he himself touched the needle. But the din was that the meat itself, the meat is tamei. So the meat itself is tamei, but his hands, the kohen's hands, and the knife is tar. Yeah, we finished up yesterday that was a psak din. The psak din was that the knife is tar, the hands are tar, and the meat is tamei. Rabbi said that Baruch Hashem Rabbanu Warren Gezer, it's a big schus. Schus shein tumah l'dam mikdash. It's a big schus that Chacham Warren Gezer that the hands should become tamei in the Beis Hamikdash. We're going to see exactly what that means. Yeah. Okay, so we're holding top of your Testament base. It says the Gemara v'neima shein tum shadayim became mikdash. We said two chedushim inside this case. The first case was that the knife isn't tamei, and the second chedush was that the hands aren't tamei. Says the Gemara, why did Rabbi Akiva only mention the chiddush that the hands don't become tamei? The chiddush is another chiddush. The chiddush is the knife doesn't become tamei. Says the Gemara, v'neima shein tum shadayim became a mikdash. Instead of Rabbi Akiva saying that it's good for Chacham and Gezer tum on hands, tum on the hands. Rabbi Akiva should have said that Chacham not only weren't Gezer tum on the hands, but Chacham weren't Gezer tum on vessels also. Because we said in the case that the psak was that even the knife is tar. So why did Rabbi Akiva miss out the vessels? Says the Gemara, Amar Rav, you heard the name of the Rav. Some people say it was the base of Chanina, that Yodaim Kedem Gzeres Kedem Nishna. That the takana of hands becoming tamei was before they were gezer that came to become tamei. Yeah, because we know that Shlomo Melech was masakin that stam yodaim, stam hands are tamei, become tamei, and only later Shama and Hillel were masakin that kelim stam kelim should become tamei. So the reason why Rabbi Akiva only mentioned that the chiddush is that the hands aren't tamei is because that was in his time. Mashenkin the Gzeir of kelim was later on. Something about it. How can you say that they were made two different times? Amar Rava. They were made in the same day. Both of these takanas. Side the takana that stam yudayim, stam hands are tamei. That's why we wash tiras yudayim, because they were greater that the hands have become stam tamei for eating truma, and they were greater on Canaan on the same day. How do we know that? Nakru says in the Mishnah. It says in the Mishnah that Chacham were greater on sefer, they were greater on svarim, v'hayadayim, and hands, v'atvolyem, and a tvolyem, which we explained that what tvolyem is, that after he went to mikveh, but he still has to wait until the night. And va'echlin va'kelim shenitu v'mashkin, and food and drink that became tamei by mashke, that they were gezer on that day, that hands should become tamei and kelim should become tamei. And Chanina said that when the Beis Hamikdash they shouldn't become tamei. So why is Rabbi Akiva machalik that only that Rabbi Akiva only mentions that the schus is that the chiddush is that the Beis Hamikdash hands don't become tamei. L'chayra, we should have mentioned also the chiddush is that vessels don't become tamei, because we said that the kohen asked the Rav what to do, and the Rav told him, your hands are tired and the knife is tired. So a knife is a kli. Says the Gemara, Rava says, the reason why Rabbi Akiva didn't mention the chiddush is that in Beis Hamikdash the knife doesn't become tamei, because it's not a chiddush in Beis Hamikdash the knife doesn't become tamei. Because even in cholin, even in regular situation, not in the Beis Hamikdash, a knife that touched the suffix tumah would also not be tamei. How do we know? Because high sack in the nagel now, which type of knife are we talking about? What exactly happened that the knife touched? If you tell me the knife touched the meat that we found the tamdik needle in, so the din is that food is not matama kelim, and if food is not matama kelim, so the piece of meat, even if the piece of meat was tamei, you have to get rid of the piece of meat, but the piece of meat doesn't have kayach to matama the vessel, doesn't have kayach to matama the knife, so the knife would have been tamei anyway. So you're gonna have to tell me you're telling me that the knife didn't touch the piece of meat, the knife actually touched this needle. And the chiddush is that even so, the knife isn't tummy. Says the Gemara, but that's not a chiddush. But it ain't kli matama kli. There's a din that a kli that's not a avtum. I mean, if you have a needle that touched a dead person, the dead person is avtum, the needle is a rishon. And the din is that a needle cannot be matame kelim. You can matame people, but you can't matame any other vessels. So even if the knife touched the needle, so it would not make the knife tummy because the needle doesn't have the strength to matame the knife. So that's why Rabbi didn't mention the chiddush that the knife didn't become tamei because it's not a chiddush; it's a regular din. There's basically in that case there was no way the knife should become tamei because the needle wasn't a av tumah, the needle was a first degree tumah or second degree tumah, whatever it was, and they didn't have kayach to matame the knife anyway. That's Rabbi they mentioned this thing. Mashenke regarding the hands is a chiddush because usually we say that hands that have anything to do with tumah are the din is they're tamei. The chiddush is that in some English they weren't gazing such a strong decree because they didn't want half the kabbanis to go and go to waste. So that's what Rabbi was saying, that Zachino, we were zeiche, that Chachamim weren't masakin tumas yadayim in this English. Okay. So that was all discussed in the case of the knife touching the needle. Now we're going to speak about what was the status of the needle itself. What type of needle was this? So that's the Gemara, hi machad ma'avirite. What was the story with the needle? What happened with this needle? Again, we're speaking about a story that a kohen cut open a carbon in Beis Hamikdash, and while he was cutting open the carbon, he found a needle inside on the meat. We said if he found the needle on the dirt in the animal, meaning something which is not connected directly to the meat of the animal, but if you find the needle in the meat, stuck inside the meat, then the actual meat becomes tummy. And what type of needle are we talking about? So, if you're telling me that we're speaking about a needle, we don't know if it's tummy, if it's not tummy, we don't know. Maybe it's tummy, maybe it's not tummy. And the chiddush is that, and then the chiddush would be that even if we don't know it's tamei, we go l'chumra. Rabbanan will go l'chumra that we say we count it as tamei. So if you can tell me that was the case for hitma, we can't say that because we have a saying from Rabbi Lezer. But Rabbi Yosef Bechanina, we have it says in the name of Yosef Bechanina, Chad Omar lo yigazru al safik harukim beYerushalayim. One of them said, "The Chacham weren't gezer on safik rukim. If you have saliva that's found in Yerushalayim, where people go on the street and they spit, and the problem is a zav, someone who's tamei and he spits, someone who's a zav and he spits, or that's a liquid. The din is that liquid is tamei. The problem is that if you find stam saliva in the street, you don't know if it comes from a zav or it doesn't, or maybe it comes from a tardik person. So what's the din if I by mistake touch saliva in the street? So the din is that Rabbanan were not geyser that you're tamei. Rabbanan said you're tar. We say that we go the kola that you're tar. That was one saying that they said. Another saying that they said was v'chad amar legazra al safik hakelim sh'Yerushalayim. So if you have vessels that it's a safik, we don't know if they're tar or they're not tar, or they're tamei. We don't know what they're din. So the din is we go to kola. If you find a vessel in the street and you don't know if the vessel touched a tamei person, didn't touch a tamei person, so in Yerushalayim they weren't geyser. So the question is back to our needle. If the needle was a needle which is safik tamei, safik tar, then why would the animal be tamei? Rabbanan weren't geyser in Yerushalayim, which is obviously in Yerushalayim, and Rabbanan weren't geyser in Yerushalayim that a safik should be tamei. Answer the Gemara, Amrav Yehuda Amarav. Yehuda says in the Gemara, there's two answers to this. This is the first answer. First answer is Kagain Sha'avdere Machat Tmei Mace. He lost the needle of a Tmei Mace. He lost the needle that had to do with a dead person, and a dead person is Avtum. And the chiddush was he had a siman on this needle, meaning he was able to recognize this needle. And then when the kohen cut open the animal, he recognized this was this needle. So in other words, we basically almost 100% sure that this needle is tamei. Why? Because he has a siman on it. He knows that this needle was the needle that touched that person, and therefore it's not a suffix tamei; it's a tamei itself, and therefore it's able to matame the meat and make the meat unfit for carbon. One answer. Another answer is basically Rabbi says that Basically, but Rabbi says that it's an interesting case that it was a case that the cow came from outside Yerushalayim, and his mouth was closed throughout the whole duration that he came from outside Yerushalayim into the Beis Hamikdash. So the only way for a needle to get into an animal is obviously through his mouth. Yeah. Now we said, what was the question? Without trying to deal with the question, if the needle is a suffix tamei, if the needle is a suffix tamei, so we said in Yerushalayim they weren't gezer, that suffix tamei should be tamei. Now, what if you have a needle that comes from outside Yerushalayim? Even if the needle is a suffix tamei, in regular places, let's say you find the needle in England, and there's a suffix whether that person touched it or not, so that needle would be tamei, because on Yerushalayim they said it's not tamei. So if you had an animal that swallowed the needle in England, and he closed his mouth until he came to the Beis Hamikdash, so it's not shaykh that he swallowed the needle. It's not shaykh that this needle physically comes from Yerushalayim. And since it's not shaykh that this needle physically comes from Yerushalayim, even though right now Begashmius the needle is in Yerushalayim, but the needle comes from outside Yerushalayim, and therefore, even if it's a suffix tuma, it still has the chumras of suffix tuma outside Yerushalayim, which is tamei, and that's a chiddush that it's matame, it's matame the meat, but it's not matame the hand. Okay. So that was the two scenarios how this case happened. Either the case happened with a needle that for sure touched that person, and now he recognized the needle, or the case happened with a needle which is a suffix tuma. We don't know if it touched that person. It came around the radius of that person, but the needle came from outside Yerushalayim, so already had its status of a tuma because suffix tuma outside Yerushalayim is tamei, and then the needle came into Yerushalayim, so that's why it has the kech to matama the animal. Okay. So that's the Gemara Gufa. Now the Gemara is going to delve into the statements we said before. Then Yerushalayim, then we're not gezer on suffix tumah. If something is a suffix tumah in Yerushalayim, then we're not gezer. So that's the Gemara Gufa. We learned before. Amar Rabbi Lezer, Rabbi Yosef B'Chanina. Rabbi Lezer and Rabbi Yosef son B'Chanina said, Chad Amar. One of them said a statement that legazra al suffix or looking sheva Yerushalayim. If you have saliva that comes from it's a suffix whether the saliva comes from a tamdik person or a tardik person, and then you touched it, the din is you are tired because suffix is tired. That's one din. Another din we said before, so another din we said a very similar din that they were not gezer on suffix kalim on vessels which became tamei, or vessels which is a suffix of the tamei or not. In Yerushalayim we render these kalim as pure because suffix tumah in Yerushalayim is pure. Says the Gemara, why do we need Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Lezer, and Rabbi Yossi Mechanina, who lived in a whole bunch of generations after the Mishnah? To tell us this din, we have a clear Mishnah that tells us this din. The first case about the saliva, that all of the saliva, which is a suffix, is toy, is a clear Mishnah. Rukin Tanina, we learned about saliva in the clear Mishnah, and so to Kelim Tanina, and so to the second din about vessels, that suffix vessels is toy. We also learn the Mishnah. Where's the Mishnah? The Rukin Tanina, where do we learn the Mishnah about the saliva? It says in the Mishnah in Shkalim, it says Itnan Kol HaRukin and Mishayim Yerushalayim Toy. All the rukin, all the salivas that I found in Yerushalayim are toy. Chutz Mishal Shuk. Beside the upper marketplace, meaning they had a certain marketplace that all the Talmudic people will go dafka there. Remember, Yerushalayim was a place that people came to go to Beis Hamikdash. In order to go to Beis Hamikdash, you had to be pure. If not, you can't come into Beis Hamikdash. So people were extremely careful in Yerushalayim not to become impure. How do we do that? We have all the impure people coming to the marketplace. So they made a special marketplace for all the impure people. So that's what the Mishnah is saying. If you find saliva in the regular marketplace, in the shuk, in the Machne Yehuda, let's say, joking, I don't know if it's part of how it worked in those days. But if you find a saliva in the regular shuk, so mistama, so we said that it's called. They said that's tight. If you find saliva in this special marketplace, then we say that the saliva is tummy. But what's in the Nukuda? The Nukuda is that we have a clear Mishnah that says that a suffix is tight. So why do I need Reb Elazar and Rabbi Yossi to be machalish in this din? So the Gemara leitzlicha afagav it's chazik zo. We need Reb Elazar and Rabbi Yossi to teach us that even if it's chazik zo, I would have thought that which the Mishnah said that all salivas are tied is only because if you have a saliva like a stam saliva, you have a saliva. There's no reason. If you have a saliva, there's no reason to imagine that someone told me spat the saliva. There's no suspicion. There's no reason to assume that somebody can touches saliva like a regular saliva in the street. That's what the Mishnah says. Even if you know for a fact that, let's say, a Talmudic person walked through this marketplace in the morning, we know for a fact he would say this morning. But and then we find saliva. So the chiddush is that we don't say the saliva came from the Talmudic person. We say that the saliva came from the Talmudic person. That's the chiddush that we made from the Mishnah. Again, the Mishnah is only. I would think the Mishnah is only speaking about a case of a stam saliva that doesn't have any status to it, has no reason to assume that it's tummy. Comes Reb Elazar is machal. Even if you have a reason to assume it's tummy, because the Talmudic person walked to his marketplace this morning, the din would be that it's still tummy. Then the Gemara goes further with a question. We're still in the middle of a question. The Gemara asked, Kelim Tanina. So to regarding Kelim, we said that all vessels in Yerushalayim are tahor. We have a clear Mishnah. Why they need that Kelim Yerushalayim are tahor? We have a clear Mishnah. What's a clear Mishnah? It says in the Mishnah in Shkolim, any vessel that I found in Yerushalayim on the way to the mikveh, right? If you find the pathway going down to the mikveh, so any kelim you find there are tummy. Why the tummy? Because since the pathway going to the mikveh, so if the keli found mistama, it was on the person who dropped the kli was on the way to the mikveh to table the kli. Why did table the kli? Because it's tummy. So if you find, let's say you go to the vicious mikveh and you find kelim right outside, then they would be tummy because mistama someone came to table them. That's what the Mishnah says. The Mishnah continues saying, sorry, the alma from here we learn. From here, if the Mishnah excludes and says only all the kelim that are found on the way to the mikvah tummy is mashma, that all the other kelim in Yerushalayim are tahor. Because it's not, I don't need a special din to say that all the kelim by the mikvah tummy, because all the kelim anyway are tummy. So it must be that only the kelim on the way to the mikvah tummy, shaking all the kelim in Yerushalayim all tahor. So if you have a clear Mishnah, that's mashma that all the kelim in Yerushalayim are tahor. Why do I need a b'chanit machadish tas that all the kelim in Yerushalayim are tahor? It's a clear Mishnah. We know the Mishnah. Says the Gemara, Valita Meich, and according to your reasoning, Ema Seifa. Quote to me the second half of the Mishnah. Second half of the Mishnah says that what? That if you find vessels on the way out of the mikveh, when you find vessels, I don't know, a different pathway. That was the exit to the mikveh to hurting the toy. Why? Because obviously, if someone dropped him, they dropped him because he went to the mikveh already. So I could be medayik in the Mishnah from the fact that the Mishnah says that that all the vessels outside the mikvah tahor is mashma, all the other vessels in Yerushalayim are tummy, which is a contradiction to what we said before to Rabbi Elazar's din. So the Gemara, no, Reisha dafka, meaning when the Mishnah is not excluding anything else. The Mishnah is just saying a pasha. The Mishnah is saying that since all the kelim in Yerushalayim are tahor, all the stuff kelim are tahor, so the only place in Yerushalayim you're going to find a Talmudic kli is if it's on the way to the mikveh. That's what the Mishnah teaches that it's tahor. So that's dafka on the way to the mikveh, it's tahor. Mashenkin outside the mikveh, it's tahor. Dafka on the way to the mikveh, it's tummy. Mashenkin on the way outside the mikveh, it's tahor. The Sefer lab dafka, and that which the Mishnah said, gaz yasa, and that which the Mishnah finishes off and says, but if you find them on the way out, they're tahor. Why does the Mishnah have to tell me if you find the way out, the tahor? If the first half of the Mishnah is telling us that only circumstances you can find Talmudic kelim on the way to the mikveh, that only the Mishnah to tell me on the way out the tahor, obviously the tahor, like any other kelim are tahor. So Gemara says it doesn't mean to exclude anything else. The only thing it comes to exclude is to exclude gaz yasa. That which the Mishnah says that on the way out the tahor is to say that they had different alleyways next to the mikveh in those days. Remember, the mikveh in those days were in caves more or less. So if you find a vessel in the alleyways surrounding the mikveh, then those would be tummy. So basically, what we did was we brought down a Mishnah that says that that kelim are tummy, kelim outside the mikveh are tummy, and other kelim Yerushalayim are all tummy. So now we're going back to the case of the needle. Remember, when we had the case of the needle, we had two answers. The first answer was that, which was Rav's answer. First answer was that the needle they found inside this carbon was a needle that touched a dead person, and we recognized it. Said the Gemara, Rav, according to Rav, that says that the case was that they found that they lost a needle which touched a dead person, and then they found in the meat. Said the Gemara, the question is, we learned before, we learned if Yamodim ago, that B'chalal Cherev, we learned it from the Pasuk says that if someone's going to take a sword and kill someone with a sword, so Cherev Haru Kachal, B'chalal Cherev, someone's going to use the Cherev for a Chalal, the Cherev, the sword to kill someone. So we made it. We learned there. I think we learned this already a few months ago. That there's a special din regarding tmei mace, metal touching a tmei mace. That even though if you have a piece of plastic and a piece of plastic will touch a dead person, so the plastic will have become a rishon, not a av. That if you have a piece of plastic that touches that person, the plastic becomes the first degree tumah. But we said before that regarding metal, if metal touches a dead person, so metal doesn't become a first degree tumah. Metal becomes the same degree of the dead person itself. It becomes an av. So the question is, if we're speaking about a needle that touches that person, and the needle is tamei, so why isn't the needle matame the crane who touched the needle and the knife that touched the needle? Why is it not tamei? If you tell me that the needle isn't a disha, isn't a av, the needle is even a first degree tumah. So first degree tumah doesn't have a character to transmit to people and vessels. But if the needle has the same category of the dead person himself, of course a dead person, a person could be matame a person and kid. So why is it not matame? The only option would be Amar Ravashi. Ravashi answers, they say meres azara reshus harabim. The azara is the reshus harabim. The havalei safik matum reshus harabim. Safik tum reshus harabim. Okay, now we're going to a new sugya. There's basically, to answer the question, just to explain a bit, there's a lot of different din by tumah. One of the din by tumah is that if you have a suffix tumah, you have something which is suffix, is this tummy or not? For example, in our case, right? You have a needle, that's tummy, right? The problem is the knife is a suffix where they touched the needle or didn't touch the needle, or even the needle itself. We could say is a suffix whether for sure touched that person or didn't touch that person. So is the needle tummy or not? So it depends where you are. If you're in the Reshus Harabim, the din is any suffix of tumah in Reshus Harabim, the suffix is tor. Mashenkin, if you're in the Reshus Hayachid, so then any suffix which you're going to have in Reshus Hayachid, the din would be tummy. Again, suffix tumah in Reshus Hayachid is tummy. Suffix tumah Reshus Harabim is tor. So we're stuck with a case. Well, as we asked a good question, if you have a needle in the Beis Hamikdash and the needle touches that person, why is the needle not matame the kohen who touched the needle and the knife that touched the needle? Why is it only matame the meat? It says the Gemara that we must say that the meat in the azara has a din of Reshus Harabim. Since azara has a din of Reshus Harabim, so any suffix that happens in the Beis Hamikdash, if you have a suffix, if you touch the needle. If you have a suffix where you touch the needle, you didn't touch the needle, the din would be that what? That you will be tired. Again, the needle for sure touched the meat. The meat is tummy. But if you have a suffix, the kohen has a suffix whether he touched the needle, he didn't touch the needle. And he salty has a suffix whether the knife touched the needle, he didn't touch the needle. So the question is, it's the suffix. What do we do in this case? So if you know Reshus Hayachid, so the din would be it's tummy. But since the azara has the din of Reshus Harabim, we're going to speak about it soon why the azara would have a din of Reshus Harabim. But since azara has a din of Reshus Harabim, so a suffix in a azara, which is a Reshus Harabim, is tar, and that's why the case of the kohen, when the kohen touched the needle, the meat was tamei, the kohen was tar, and the knife was tar. Says the Gemara. So that's the way we answer the question. We ask why isn't the kohen tamei? So we answer because it's a Reshus Hayachid, it's a Reshus Harabim, since the kohen is a suffix, we touched the needle or not, so therefore he is tar. So that's the Gemara. On this answer, Gemara asks, which is from that what you're saying, that since Azara is in Reshus Harabim, so therefore it's tar. It's mashma. If this same case will occur in Reshus Hayachid, if that's in this current shechted, the carbon in his house, and he found a needle touching, a needle touching that person touching the meat, is mashma. That will be tummy, right? From the fact we have to give an answer that if the azara is like Reshus Harabim, and therefore it's tar is mashma. Therefore, it's Reshus Hayachid, it'll be tummy. Says the Gemara, Michdi, Haimacha David Shein Bei Dasti Shalo. The needle is something that we can't ask you. What's the din? I'm going to explain that in a second. David Shein Bei Dasti Shalo. Beim Reshus Harabim, Beim Reshus Hayachid Tzvekei. Okay, there's a special din that got to be tumah. It's another din. By the way, we're almost done with this whole sugi about tumah. So Chaparayim was still here. There's a din by tumah like this. If you have a person that it's a suffix whether he touched a zav or not. That's it. A person is a suffix whether he's tummy or not. What's the din? The din is that a person is tummy. Mashenkin, if you're going to have a suffix, if a child touched tumah or not. or an animal touched tumah or not, or a knife touched tumah or not, something without any seichel. So it's called davar she'ein by das lishah. In order for something to become tamei in the case of a suffix, he has to be a bar das. He has to be theoretically able to answer if he touched or not. And that's why he's tamei, because since he can give an answer, so we say, we told you prove your point, we're going to say you're tamei. In our case, a knife. If you're going to ask the knife, if the knife touched the tumah, the knife's not going to answer you because the knife doesn't have any das. And the din is by tumah that if you have a suffix which is based on something which doesn't have das, something which doesn't have intellect or a mental capacity on its own, it's toy. So why did we give a whole reason? That the reason why the knife in this case in Beis Hamikdash is toy is because it's an Rishus HaYachid, it's an Rishus HaRabim. I have a better answer. Instead of saying Nazar is Rishus HaRabim, give another answer. That since the suffix is whether the knife touched the tamei or not, the knife is something which you can't ask. Or the needle, another knife. The needle is someone it doesn't have entity on its own to answer you if someone touched it or not. And therefore, in this case, it would be tar anyway. Says the Gemara answered, Mishum have a suffix, Tumah haba b'dei ada. Because at the end of the day, who was holding the knife? The person who was holding the knife was a kohen. So even though you can't ask the needle who touched it, but you can still ask the kohen if he touched the needle or not. If you have a subject that comes through involving a person, we're going to finish that tomorrow. But the question is, if the subject involves a person over here, it doesn't only involve the child touching tumah. In this case, it involves a person, a kohen, holding a knife. The person, even though right now he doesn't know, but theoretically he would have been able to know if the knife touched the tumah or not. So therefore, in our case, the knife would have been tummy. And therefore we have to come to the Rav's Chiddush that what? That either that the needle was either the needle. The reason why the reason why the kohen and the knife is tar and the knife is tar is because the Beis Hamikdash has a din of Rishus HaRabim, and Rishus HaRabim the suffix tumah is tar. Okay, we're going to stop over here. Based on your testament base, all the way at the bottom. Have a good night.
Shkach.